The Zargal warships, massive and sleek like predatory birds, sliced through Earth's atmosphere, casting ominous shadows across cities and fields. Their descent was relentless, unchallenged, and devastating. Towering structures crumbled under their bombardment, and the sky itself seemed to tremble at their presence. To the Zargals, this was another routine conquest, one of countless worlds they'd subdued. Earth, with its fractured nations and outdated weapons, was just another weak link in the cosmic chain. Humanity's initial response was chaos. Fighter jets were swatted from the skies like insects, tanks were reduced to molten slag, and hastily organized infantry lines disintegrated under the aliens' superior firepower. Military command scrambled to adapt, but strategies fell apart before they could even be deployed. Refugees flooded into remaining strongholds, bringing stories of advanced Zargal ground units, hulking warriors clad in armor impervious to conventional firearms, moving with eerie precision. In the command center of the lead Zargal vessel, General Vrax observed the carnage with a detached amusement. His mandibles clicked softly as he reviewed footage of Earth's feudal resistance. "Primitive," he scoffed, his voice resonating with disdain. "They cling to their outdated projectile weapons, as though mere metal can pierce Zargal armor." His lieutenants chittered in agreement, their confidence unshaken. To them, humanity was nothing more than an insect to crush underfoot. They deployed elite ground troops sparingly, seeing no need for large-scale maneuvers. Victory, they believed, was a foregone conclusion. Yet, amidst the chaos, whispers of hope stirred in humanity's ranks. In a bunker deep below the ruins of a shattered city, Captain Adrian Cole received his orders. Known for his unmatched precision and nerves of steel, Cole had spent years perfecting his craft. A sniper by training, he had a reputation for making the impossible shot, even under the direst conditions. But this mission was unlike any he had ever faced. He was tasked with hunting a foe that saw itself as invulnerable. The plan was as audacious as it was desperate. Humanity had no chance in open warfare, but they could target the Zargal's greatest weakness, their reliance on a rigid chain of command. By taking out their generals and high-ranking officers, humanity hoped to sow chaos among the alien forces, giving Earth a fighting chance. Cole's role was critical. His rifle, modified with advanced suppressors and custom ammunition, would be their silent weapon. And he wouldn't be alone. Beside him stood a figure known only as the Spotter. They were a ghost, operating in the shadows of military lore, with a reputation for finding vulnerabilities no one else could see. While Cole trusted few people, he trusted the Spotter implicitly. Their partnership was unspoken but seamless, each anticipating the other's moves. Together, they were a precision instrument, a blade aimed at the Zargal's heart. Cole studied the mission brief, his face set in a grim mask. Satellite images showed Zargal command posts scattered across key strategic points. Each was guarded by elite soldiers, their presence a testament to the Zargal's hubris. The aliens didn't bother hiding. They didn't think they needed to. The first few missions were fraught with challenges. Cole and the Spotter infiltrated enemy-occupied zones, moving like shadows through the rubble. They scouted positions, gauged wind speeds, and adjusted for the Zargal's advanced armor. But when Cole pulled the trigger, his bullets ricocheted harmlessly off alien plating. The Zargals, if they noticed at all, dismissed the attempts as futile gestures. To them, it wasn't even worth a response. Among Earth's own forces, skepticism grew. Many questioned the viability of sniper teams against an alien juggernaut. Even Cole, despite his confidence, felt the weight of doubt pressing down on him. But the Spotter's calm, steady presence anchored him. "They think they're untouchable," they murmured during one tense night, their voice barely above a whisper. "That's their weakness." Cole didn't respond, but those words stayed with him. If the Zargals believed they were invincible, then breaking that belief would be their ultimate weapon. The night was quiet, broken only by the distant hum of Zargal patrol drones. Hidden among the shattered remains of a once bustling city, Cole adjusted his rifle's scope, his breath steady despite the tension crackling in the air. Beside him, the Spotter's eyes scanned the horizon, calculating distances and angles with inhuman precision. Their target was a Zargal officer, visible only as a faint silhouette against the flickering glow of alien searchlights. The officer stood flanked by 2 hulking guards, his armor gleaming faintly under the starlight. To any ordinary soldier, the shot would seem impossible, over a mile away, through layers of interference, with a narrow window of opportunity. But for Cole, it was just another challenge. The spotter gave a single nod, their hand resting lightly on his shoulder. He exhaled, his finger tightening on the trigger. The shot rang out like a whisper in the stillness. The officer's head snapped back, a burst of greenish fluid erupting from the precise entry point. The body crumpled, and for a moment the guards hesitated, confused by the unseen assailant. Cole and the spotter were already gone, disappearing into the shadows before the alarm could sound. Back aboard his flagship, General Vrax dismissed the report with a sharp click of his mandibles. "Human desperation," he muttered, waving the holographic display aside. "Anomalous luck. A fluke." His lieutenants nodded in agreement, their arrogance undiminished. To them, a single loss was insignificant. They were focused on the broader campaign, not the isolated actions of a desperate resistance. But on the ground, whispers began to spread among the lower-ranking Zargals. Other officers had fallen in recent days, each death eerily precise, with no trace of the attackers. Rumors of phantom killers began to circulate, unsettling the otherwise disciplined ranks. The Zargals were not used to being hunted, and the unknown gnawed at their confidence. Cole, meanwhile, was haunted by neither the kill nor the praise it garnered. Sitting under the cover of dense forest, he methodically cleaned his rifle, his thoughts far from the battlefield. He remembered his first sniper drill back in training, the weight of the weapon feeling foreign in his hands. His instructor's voice echoed in his mind. "A sniper doesn't shoot to kill. A sniper shoots to change the battle." Each pull of the trigger brought that philosophy into sharper focus. He wasn't just eliminating targets, he was dismantling a belief. Every alien commander that fell was a crack in the Zargal's armor of invincibility. Yet the cost weighed heavily on him. The faces of fallen comrades flickered through his mind, a silent reminder of the stakes. The spotter, ever aware of his mood, broke the silence. "One shot at a time, Cole. That's all it takes." The sniper teams quickly adapted to Earth's diverse terrain. Urban ruins provided high vantage points, while dense forests offered concealment. Mountains became sanctuaries, their sheer cliffs perfect for long-range operations. Cole and the spotter moved like ghosts, blending seamlessly with their surroundings. They studied Zargal patterns meticulously, identifying weaknesses and exploiting them with ruthless efficiency. Innovation became their greatest weapon. Cole's team began using decoys, carefully placed noise emitters and reflective surfaces to confuse Zargal sensors. Suppressors were modified to eliminate even the faintest sound, and their camouflage gear incorporated advanced thermal masking. The sniper's ingenuity outpaced the Zargal's ability to adapt, leaving the aliens struggling to counter them. Still, Vrax refused to acknowledge the growing threat. He attributed the losses to incompetence among his ground commanders, berating them in private while publicly maintaining an air of unshaken confidence. "Let the humans exhaust themselves," he sneered during a briefing. "Their futile efforts cannot alter the inevitable." This arrogance proved to be his greatest weakness. As Cole and his fellow snipers refined their tactics, the Zargal's refusal to adapt left them increasingly vulnerable. Cole's next mission was already taking shape, a more ambitious operation, one that would strike deeper into the heart of the alien hierarchy. The tide was beginning to turn, and the silent shadows of Earth's defenders were growing bolder. The target was unlike any before, General Korath, a towering figure among the Zargal ranks, renowned for his battlefield strategies and revered as a symbol of invincibility. His inspection tour of a forward command post had been announced openly, a calculated display of power meant to demoralize the human resistance. For Cole and the spotter, it was an opportunity too critical to ignore. They had spent 2 days in the mountains, enduring freezing winds and sparse cover, studying the command post from a distance. Zargal soldiers patrolled with mechanical precision, their movements synchronized, their armor glinting under the harsh sunlight. Korath himself was unmistakable, a hulking presence in a reinforced exosuit designed to withstand almost anything Earth's forces could throw at it. Almost anything. The moment came in the late afternoon, as Korath stepped out of the command tent to address his officers. Cole steadied his rifle, his breath slow and deliberate. The spotter had already calculated every variable: wind speed, elevation, armor thickness, even the trajectory required to bypass the exosuit's overlapping plates. Their murmured confirmation was the only sound besides the faint hum of alien machinery. Cole fired. The bullet traveled in a perfect arc, piercing through a narrow gap in Korath's armor at the base of his neck. For a moment, the general stood still, as if defying the inevitability of death. Then he collapsed, a gurgling sound escaping his mandibles as green blood pooled beneath him. His officers froze, their discipline shattered by the sheer impossibility of what had just occurred. The chaos that followed was instantaneous. Zargal soldiers barked conflicting orders, scanning the mountainside for the unseen threat. Drones swept the terrain but found nothing. Cole and the spotter had already slipped away, leaving only confusion and fear in their wake. The news of Korath's assassination spread like wildfire through Zargal ranks. On the flagship, General Vrax listened to the reports with clenched mandibles, his calm exterior betrayed by the flicker of his segmented eyes. He replayed the footage of Korath's death, analyzing the trajectory of the shot, the precision required to make it. His lieutenants waited in silence, knowing better than to speak. "They dare," Vrax finally hissed, his voice low and dangerous. "These primitives think themselves clever." He refused to acknowledge the possibility that human snipers posed a legitimate threat. Instead, he berated his ground commanders for failing to protect Korath, ignoring the growing unease among his officers. On Earth, the assassination marked a turning point. The Zargal command structure, once a flawless machine, began to fracture under the weight of uncertainty. Lower-ranking officers hesitated to make decisions, fearing they might be next. Patrols grew erratic, abandoning key positions to avoid sniper fire. The once mighty invaders appeared vulnerable for the first time. Humanity seized the moment. Small guerrilla teams, emboldened by the sniper's success, launched targeted strikes against weakened outposts. Supply lines were ambushed, communication hubs destroyed. Every action chipped away at the Zargal's dominance, forcing them into a defensive posture. For the first time since the invasion began, the balance of power shifted, however slightly, in humanity's favor. Within the resistance, Cole and the spotter became legends. Stories of their exploits spread among soldiers and civilians alike, lifting spirits in the darkest of times. To many, they were symbols of humanity's resilience, proof that the invaders were not invincible. Despite the growing momentum, Cole remained focused. The war was far from over, and the Zargals were still a formidable foe. But as he and the spotter prepared for their next mission, he couldn't ignore the faint spark of hope ignited within him. The enemy had been wounded, their arrogance shaken. And for the first time, victory no longer seemed impossible. The Zargal war machine was faltering, and General Vrax knew it. Reports of fractured ranks, assassinated officers, and decimated outposts flooded his command deck. His previously unshakable confidence was eroding, replaced by a simmering rage that burned beneath his composed exterior. The human snipers were no longer an annoyance. They were a threat to his carefully orchestrated campaign. But Vrax, true to his nature, refused to acknowledge that the problem lay in his strategy. Instead, he blamed his enemy's terrain, their unpredictability, their desperation. Determined to crush the resistance once and for all, Vrax ordered the deployment of advanced countermeasures. Specialized drones equipped with thermal imaging and advanced tracking algorithms scoured the battlefield for heat signatures and ballistic trails. Elite tracking squads, trained to move silently and strike swiftly, were dispatched to hunt down Cole's team and others like them. The Zargals poured resources into neutralizing these phantom killers, certain that overwhelming force would bring them back under control. Yet Earth's terrain betrayed the aliens at every turn. The drones faltered in dense forests and jagged mountain ranges, where the snipers used natural cover to mask their movements. Urban ruins created thermal interference, confusing even the most sophisticated sensors. The human teams adapted faster than the Zargals could recalibrate, using misdirection and ambush tactics to turn the hunters into the hunted. Counter-sniper squads returned with heavy losses, their reports filled with frustration and fear. Cole remained at the heart of the resistance, pushing himself beyond the limits of exhaustion. His injuries, scrapes, bruises, and the occasional deep cut were badges of survival, reminders of how close the enemy had come. But it wasn't just the physical toll that weighed on him. In the rare quiet moments, memories of his family surfaced unbidden: his wife's laugh, his daughter's curious questions about the stars. They were why he fought, but they were also a sharp reminder of all he stood to lose. The burden of taking lives to preserve what remained of humanity gnawed at him. "You're still here," the spotter said quietly one night as they prepared for the next mission. It wasn't a question, it was a statement, one that cut through the guilt gnawing at Cole's mind. Their words steadied him, as they always did. He nodded, the rifle in his hands an anchor to his purpose. The next mission was unlike any before it, a direct strike on Vrax himself. Intelligence had revealed the general's decision to take the field, desperate to rally his crumbling troops. It was an uncharacteristic move, born of frustration and pride. Vrax's command vehicle, a heavily armored transport bristling with energy shields, was the perfect representation of Zargal arrogance, a fortress on wheels, yet ultimately vulnerable. The mission required precision and audacity. Cole and the spotter spent days scouting the route Vrax's convoy would take, identifying the perfect vantage point. They chose a cliffside overlooking a narrow valley, where the command vehicle would be exposed for mere seconds. The distance was staggering, even for Cole's skills, and the shot would require not only perfect execution but also perfect timing. As the convoy entered the valley, the tension was palpable. Cole's heartbeat slowed, his mind focusing entirely on the task at hand. The spotter whispered adjustments, recalculating wind speeds and shield oscillations in real time. Cole's finger hovered over the trigger as the transport came into view. The shot rang out, a silent whisper of death that traveled across miles. The bullet struck its mark, penetrating the weakened shield at the precise moment of oscillation and slamming into the command vehicle's core systems. The explosion that followed was deafening, a cascade of energy and debris that illuminated the valley like a second sunrise. Vrax's transport was reduced to a smoking husk, the general inside obliterated in an instant. Chaos erupted in the convoy. Soldiers scattered, firing blindly into the cliffs, but Cole and the spotter were already gone, vanishing into the landscape like shadows. The Zargal command structure, already fragile, collapsed entirely with Vrax's death. Lower-ranking officers bickered over succession, while soldiers abandoned their posts, terrified of an enemy they couldn't see or understand. For the first time, the Zargals faced the full consequences of their hubris. Their failure to adapt, their reliance on rigid hierarchy, and their disdain for human ingenuity had sealed their fate. The shot that ended it all was perfect in its simplicity. Cole's finger pressed the trigger, and a single bullet soared across the vast expanse, invisible yet unstoppable. It pierced the protective shields of Vrax's command vehicle at the exact moment they faltered, a hairline crack exploited with surgical precision. Inside, Vrax had just begun to roar his final orders when the round struck. In an instant, the Zargal general and his command were engulfed in a blinding flash, their fortress obliterated by a precise strike. The most invincible force in the galaxy had met its match, not through superior firepower, but through the ingenuity and courage of a single man and his unseen partner. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Zargal troops, already on edge, broke ranks entirely. Some scrambled for cover, others abandoned their posts outright, their morale shattered without their leader. The fear that had simmered within the alien ranks now boiled over, consuming what remained of their resolve. Orders went unanswered, squadrons dissolved, and the once dominant Zargal war machine ground to a halt, fractured by panic and disarray. For humanity, Vrax's death was a signal. Across Earth, resistance forces launched coordinated attacks, reclaiming lost cities and driving the invaders back. The sniper teams, emboldened by their success, intensified their assaults on remaining Zargal officers. The alien hierarchy, designed around rigid obedience and centralized authority, crumbled under the strain of constant disruption. The invaders' technological superiority became meaningless in the face of guerrilla tactics they couldn't counter. As victory began to emerge from the ashes, humanity turned its gaze inward, tallying the cost of survival. Entire cities lay in ruins, and millions of lives had been lost in the fight to reclaim Earth. Yet in the midst of destruction, there was hope. Humanity had proven itself resourceful, adaptive, and resilient. The invaders, with all their advanced technology and hubris, had underestimated the strength of a species that refused to surrender. Cole stood on a ridge overlooking one of the reclaimed cities, the distant sound of celebration faintly reaching his ears. The spotter sat beside him, silent as always. The mission was over, but the weight of its consequences lingered. Cole thought of the friends he had lost, the civilians who would never rebuild their homes, and the soldiers who had given everything for a shot at freedom. The cost had been immense, and he carried it with him like a scar. "Do you think they'll ever know?" he asked quietly, not looking at the spotter. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Perhaps it didn't matter. What mattered was that Earth endured, and the Zargals would never forget the silent resistance that had brought them to their knees. In the aftermath, the sniper teams became legends. Their names were whispered in awe, their tactics studied in every military academy. But Cole and the spotter remained shadows, their identities known only to a handful of trusted leaders. They had no interest in glory, only in the knowledge that they had done their part. Their story would live on, even if their faces did not. As humanity began the arduous process of rebuilding, one truth stood out above all: the silent shot that ended Vrax's reign had changed everything. It was a testament to the power of ingenuity and determination, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there was always a way forward. Cole slung his rifle over his shoulder and exchanged a glance with the spotter. Without a word, they turned and disappeared into the fading light, leaving the world they had saved to heal itself. Their mission was complete, but their fight, the fight to protect humanity's fragile spark, would never truly end. The silence they left behind was not one of despair, but of triumph. And in that silence echoed a single phrase: the silent shot that changed everything.